everything is going to have to be sort of more Israeli, by which I meant just that the kind of protection that surrounds Israeli senior figures, particularly the prime minister, will be the sort of thing that will happen more in America. That the way in which there are a large number of people desperate, particularly young people, desperate to fix themselves to a cause is part of what I and others have called the meaning crisis that's going on in the West at the moment. But in the midst of the meaning crisis, fixing yourself to a cause, and one that you're willing to be on the barricades for, is I don't know if I want to say it's a growing phenomenon, but it's an existing phenomenon for sure. I made the comment quite often after the atrocities of October the 7th that I was struck by the fact that the generation who had gone up to university that month or the month before had been gearing up for a climate emergency, climate crisis protests. Instead, thanks to the actions of Hamas, affixed themselves to the Hamas side in the Israel-Hamas war, the Israel-Iranian Revolutionary Government war. And there's a lot to be said about this, but as I say, for the time being, the notable thing to me is these are essentially people wanting to affix themselves to any cause, to have the thrill of meaning, of revolutionaryism. And unfortunately, I mean, certainly 1917 should teach us that whatever it is you hoped for in that revolutionary moment, you can never control it. This is these forces, the forces that permit murder, that excuse murder, that make the most wild accusations against the status quo whilst never appreciating anything good about the status quo, are the forces that create whirlwinds. And I'm simply of the belief that most of the people playing around with this dark whirlwind creation are people who would not like the results of it. I mentioned in that column last week that, if these people, the New York Times, really do excuse looting and theft from shops, for instance, and if they really do excuse murder, they better watch out, because history shows that these things aren't one directional. I joked in that column that readers should, if they want, go and help themselves to any of the stuff that those New York Times podcasters own, because clearly it's just okay to take the old 5-finger discount if you feel like it. But other people, equally wicked people, may think that the violence should go against them and in their direction. I wouldn't want that. Because, like you, having seen the consequences of violence, I hate it with all my heart, and want it to be as little existing in our world and our orbit as possible. But people who've never seen it and don't understand the consequences and don't know what an exit wound looks like and don't know the unmendable damage that murder and political violence does to everyone around the person who suffers it. People who don't know that are willing on something which, I mean, I simply can't use any word other than the term evil. It's evil.
After the shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner on Saturday night, you and I spotted each other across the room and got to chatting. And it made sense here on the Monday after the fact to do a bit of a debrief about what you saw. Douglas, what was your Saturday night like? How'd it go?
Well, it started, like all of us, by being harangued by protesters outside the venue as I was walking up to the hotel where the White House Correspondents Dinner always takes place. There were people, one woman in a keffiyeh screaming at me, how could you possibly have dinner with a child rapist and genocidist and that sort of thing. And I never particularly liked being heckled by strangers, but that was the sort of the tenor of it when everyone was going in and queuing. The event itself was the normal run of things, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, pre-parties and pre-drinks things, and then everyone filing into the hall. I was with my colleagues from the New York Post at one of their tables, and I had Mike Waltz and Scott Bessent and others, and it was all going on as normal. The president came in. There was great excitement because, of course, it was the first time that President Trump had come to the White House Correspondents' Dinner last week. Notably, not just he, but none of the administration came. So it was a big thing, and everyone was looking forward to it. I think they were looking forward, among other things, to Donald Trump roasting the media which was what we were all expecting. And then something happened. I was close to the front where the president was, as you were. And so I didn't hear the shots. I just thought that it was, as the president thought as well, I thought it was somebody had dropped a tray and something like that. But then it became clear that something bad was happening. That really became clear when the Secret Service rushed down the center of the area. Because I had cabinet members near me, they were all covered by Secret Service pretty fast. It was very impressive. Yes, we all sheltered down, and I saw from the video I had my head up a bit too high because I was just trying to see what was going on. But yes, then it became clear it was very serious. As the Secret Service were clambering over the tables, I suppose most of us had in mind the thought that there was probably another shooter in the room. And that's why, by the way, I've seen a certain amount of, well, a lot of weird criticism online of people in the hall, but I know somebody started chanting USA, USA at one point, and nobody picked up the chant. And some people online have been trying to pretend that's because journalists aren't patriotic or something like that. And of course, it was simply that we were all trying to remain quiet so that the Secret Service could do their job and ensure that there wasn't another shooter in the room. So it was the same experience most of us had. I had colleagues certainly who were by the doors and heard the gunshots and are rather more alarmed by that than those of us who were further away. But yes, I mean, it was a horrifying thing to happen. As you know, in general, if you're in a sort of dangerous area, in a conflict or the like, you sort of prepare yourself in advance for alarming and bad things to happen. But it's always worse when you're in a situation where you're not expecting that, and whilst tucking into the first course and making small talk, none of us expected the evening would go the way it did.
I'm curious your thoughts on security and just how safe you and your table mates felt. I confess I was a bit skeptical of security even as I sat down. I was surprised that nobody checked my ID. I was surprised that the checkpoint, such as it was basically at the door to the ballroom, which means you could go, as indeed the shooter did, anywhere in the hotel you wanted, armed to the teeth. That's slightly exaggerating the case, but not really. I mean, there was a fair amount of freedom to move around the rest of the building before you got to the ballroom itself. And these thoughts were occurring to me even as I sat down. I was then struck by not so much the chaos, because chaos is to be expected in moments like that. And as a war correspondent, you know that. I actually spent the incident itself. There was a photograph of me that got some circulation that got me accused of apparently feeling a great deal of ennui was the word applied to me on the internet because of my apparently bored expression, which is just my serious face. But what I was really feeling was mild annoyance at myself for not being able to figure out what was going on, because it was just extremely confusing. Where I was sitting, the music was very loud, so I didn't hear any gunshots, and I just couldn't quite piece it together, nor could anyone in my corner of the room at first. But then I was shocked by, for example, how long the president was on the stage after the incident began. I was shocked by the fact that Pete Hegseth, who was sitting at my table, was a solid 2 minutes or so before his guys came to get him. What was your impression of the security of the event?
I mean, in a way, I'm reluctant to criticize after the fact, as you know. I mean, in a way, everyone does the best they can in the circumstances they find themselves in. I mean, certainly it was strange that IDs and things weren't checked, and that there weren't metal detectors until we got actually to the ballroom. And certainly at the pre parties in the hotel, there were cabinet members and other very senior administration figures going in and out of some of those parties. They themselves have checklists, but I mean, not metal detectors or anything. There's quite a lot that I suspect, after all of these such events, what happens is, we all learn to live with a worse, tighter state of security. I mean, obviously since Butler and Charlie Kirk's murder, nobody's doing outside events. Now inside events, I imagine, will be even more tightly controlled than before, particularly if the president or people in the administration are present. I mean, it is alarming in retrospect, just how many people in the chain of command were in such a small area. And quite a lot of people have pointed out that, if this had been a more organized cell, say, an Iranian cell or something, they could have done an unbelievable, unimaginable amount of damage and terror. Yes, I mean, I was watching quite closely the members of the cabinet, and I was focused not just on ones on my table, but I was actually looking across at Bobby Kennedy, because he was just across the aisle from me, and he was pinned, down by his security people. But I have to say, I think I think my immediate thoughts went to two people in the room in particular. One was him, and seeing him being bundled out through the back, given his family history, I just sort of thought this just seemed additionally awful. And the other person who I immediately thought about was Erica Kirk, who was at the dinner. And I just think that for people who have experienced political violence and it's come that close to home for them, I just think that something like Saturday night must be so much worse than for anyone else present. I think that, I think one of my first reactions, I think I said to somebody on Saturday night, was that everything is going to have to be sort of more Israeli, by which I meant just that the kind of protection that surrounds Israeli senior figures, particularly the prime minister, will be the sort of thing that will happen more in America. That's in a way, again, it's strange that there hasn't been tighter security in this case, but all acts of terrorism, as you know, always have a consequence in subsequently infringing on the freedom of people to live in anywhere normal life, and that obviously includes the most senior figures, but everybody else as well. We got used for years to taking out our liquids at airports because of one plot in 2006 to bring down planes with explosives mixed on board. We got used after the shoe bomber Richard Reed trying to put the bombs in his shoes and bring down aircraft. We got used to our shoes having to come off at airports. All of these things, we're now used to the fact that, there almost certainly won't be outdoor events for people like Trump ever again. And we'll just get used to extra rings of security and, just have to put up with it.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this: you can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely. It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.